Good afternoon and welcome to Indie Business Radio for Monday, November 12th, 2007. I'm your host, Donna Maria, and you have arrived at the one place where we empower you to enjoy your life, build your business, and have your way. Today's show is sponsored by Essential Labs. Let our cosmetic spaces wear your brand name as you free up your time for marketing and sales. Essential Labs, professional, reliable, yours. Call 877-939-5227 or visit essentiallabs.com for more information. You know, I read a lot of newspapers and business sections and business books and all kinds of financial planning resources these days. And one of the things that I have come to discover through all of my research and reading is that one of the topics that small business owners seem to be least informed about is the topic of financial planning. We have these businesses, and we also have families. So what happens in an emergency? What happens if something happens to you? What happens to your business? What happens to your family? Who runs the business? There's a million questions that need to be answered, and our guest today is on hand to help us sort through all of the financial quagmires. His name is Edwin Gaskin. He is a financial planner at Gateway Capital Financial, an office of MetLife. He works with clients to design financial strategies to help minimize taxes, protect against loss of income through disability, life and health insurance planning, and he also specifically focuses on working with families and small businesses and not-for-profit groups to help them understand all of these issues, sort through them, and make the decisions that are best for them and their families. Welcome to Indie Business Radio, Edwin.
Thank you, Donna. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I certainly am excited to have you. Now, let's give everybody who's listening a little bit of information about you, Ed. What's your background in this area? And you're a family man, too, so you have some personal insights into the importance of these topics.
Well, thanks for asking, Donna. I have a fascinating background as far as I'm concerned. This is actually my second career. I spent the first part of my career in information systems and spent many, many years doing something I really didn't enjoy because the money was good. And a turn in my life associated with a loss of a loved one caused me to be able to focus on what was most important, and that led to a change in career. And in fact, one of the key things that I wanted to do, which kind of goes along with a lot of the people I'm sure listening today, is that I wanted to have an impact with what I did for a living as well as be able to support my family. So it led to me really changing to an area that could help a lot of different people under a lot of different circumstances.
And so in your experience, you working with a lot of small business owners, Ed, what do you see as some of the big challenges and issues that people just aren't informed on that we can cover today?
Well, I think the first thing to recognize is that small business people are regular people. Most of the challenges that Americans face in terms of making decisions between limited dollars coming in the door and what to do with them going out the other side are the same for all Americans. But small business owners have some unique circumstances that give them some unique challenges as well as some unique opportunities as it relates to being small business owners, whether it comes to how they budget and separate their business and personal expenses, or whether it means taking advantage of the tax advantages offered to small business owners. All of those things are areas they need to know how to navigate.
And Ed, let's just say there's some indies out there who, kind of know a little bit of the lingo in terms of, we've all heard terms tossed around, term insurance, permanent, all kinds of terms that we hear every day, and it seems just like such a challenge to wrap your hands around all of it. Where is the best place for someone who's gotten their business to the point where they do have the opportunity because they have the income coming in? May not be a whole lot of income that's above the profit margin, but enough to start trying to figure out the best ways to work with it so the business is protected and their family is protected.
Well, Donna, that's an excellent question, because I think the first place that I would recommend people start is what their goals are. If they're married, getting together with their spouse and setting their goals so that they're able to prioritize what's most important. Of course, in the process of setting goals, many times for families, one of the things that you do want to do is be able to protect your family in the case of unexpected circumstances. And unexpected circumstances come along often enough that there is an entire industry created around helping people protect themselves when those things occur. Of course, that's the insurance industry, whether it's property and casualty, whether it's life insurance, whether it's health insurance, medical insurance. All of those types of insurances are designed to allow people to continue to at least achieve some of their goals without having to be dead in the water when something unexpected happens.
So let's talk then, Ed, about probably the biggest thing that could happen and that is that you, as the person that's running this business, as either an individual business, a sole proprietorship, or an LLC where you're the only member. Mm-hmm. Let's say you want to think about what happens if I'm no longer here to run this business and generate the income that supports my family. That's probably a good goal that most everyone listening would have. So what do you do next if you've decided that's your top priority? Is it if you happen to be disabled or pass away, what do you want to have happen? What are the options that you have, Ed?
Well, let's start with probably the most misunderstood type of protection we need, which is protection for income. It works for disability and life insurance.
Right.
You think about disability. Disability is really a catastrophic event for many Americans that causes a loss of income. It happens actually, your probability for disability is much higher for most people of working age than dying. But it's something we tend not to think about, and therefore we don't protect against. Depending on the size of your business, you may have the ability to literally cover your income. If you think about it, everything we do derives from the ability to bring money in, whether it's paying for a mortgage, whether it's paying for tuition for our kids, whether it's paying for retirement. All of that comes out of income. So it's very important that we are able to protect our income from long-term illnesses, for example, or from injury or accidents. Depending on the size of your business, there are many different options. If you have a business that has more than one person in it, you might actually be eligible for group disability insurance, which allows you to cover the gap, or at least a portion of the gap that you would experience if you can't work. If you have a business that you work outside of the home, but you're the only person, then maybe an individual disability policy is the way to go. Of course, the differences are the way they're underwritten in terms of how you get them and your ability to qualify is significantly different between group coverage and individual coverage. Individual coverage tends to be much more expensive, but it also has additional benefits in terms of being able to protect you in more ways. It also allows you to be able to, if you're paying the premium yourself, allows you to receive benefits tax-free in the case of a disability, whereas group coverage usually is paid for by, quote-unquote, the company, even if it's a small company, which may result in you being able to deduct premiums. But the other side of it is when you claim benefits, they may be taxable to you. The same thing goes for life insurance. The number one reason people get life insurance is to replace income.
Right.
So this is still the number one consideration people have is obviously if you're talking about continuing to allow your kids to go to school, allowing your spouse to or your family to be able to live in your home without having to move under dire circumstances.
Right.
All of those things mean replacement of income, and that's also what something life insurance can do.
Now, Ed, if you're a small business and, again, you've gotten to the point where you can start looking at some of these things, between those two, disability and life insurance, is there a way to get both of them together? Do you suggest people, maybe if someone can only pay for one at a time, to start with one and then add the other? What would your recommendation be if someone could only do one of those?
Well, it's a difficult circumstance answering a question. From many of the people on the line will have varied circumstances that will make any single answer inappropriate. Mm-hmm. But I would say that it would be I would say to really make a determination about where the greatest impact would be for you, you might want to speak to a professional, go on the web and review options. Obviously, both is the right answer,
And you can do both. You can do both together, or you can do one or the other, right?
That's correct. That's correct.
And if you do one and then a year later you want to add the other, you can do that as well.
Well, obviously, having something is a whole lot better than having nothing. And
amen to that.
Often will tell my clients that if you can't do what's best, do what's better. Which means,
and let's talk about that for a second, because I find that, that statement runs across a lot of different areas. Yeah. This one in particular, so many people become frustrated, or they just feel as though they can't understand it, or they can't afford it anyway, so they just kind of ignore it.
Yes, yes.
And then nothing happens.
Yeah, well, again, I think that goes back to understanding. If you know what your goals and your priorities are, it makes it a little bit more less confusing when you're making decisions about where to put limited dollars. If your number one goal is to prepare for retirement, then you're going to make decisions differently than if your number one goal is to make sure your family can stay in your home if something happens to you.
Right, right. And that's a good way to put it, too. I thank you for that, because sometimes part of the confusion and frustration is simply that you don't know what your goals are.
Absolutely.
So setting them will at least give you some incentive to take the time to wrap your hands around the topics.
And I'm sure, Donna, as you have said many, many times, that's one of the key differentiators between even the probability of success for a small business owner is understanding what their goals are. The same thing goes for your family. Right,
right. So disability insurance and life insurance. And then what are some of the basic factors to think about where that's concerned? Now, I know the industry has changed a whole lot since you got into it. What are some of the biggest changes that have occurred, and how have they impacted, small business owners and families?
Well, I think the biggest change is probably most people, if they haven't looked at insurances in a long time, is to understand that it probably is not as difficult as you think it is to determine what your needs are. But on the other side, you're probably underestimating the amount of your need. I'll give you an example. I know probably a lot of the indie business owners may be women on the line. We've determined in studies that about 64% of women carry no life insurance, even though they're the majority of people that are even owning many small businesses right now. So it's oftentimes overlooked, whether you're working in the home or working outside the home, the value that a spouse, especially a female spouse, brings to a family.
64%?
64% of women carry no life insurance.
None at all.
It is not unusual for me to walk into circumstances, of course, since I deal a lot with families, and sometimes that means families with more than one child or several children, where a stay-at-home mom may be focusing on raising the family, and the assumption is, well, there's no economic value. Well, I hate to tell you, but if you've priced an au pair or daycare, or an in-home school tutor, you'd be surprised the economic impact not having a wife in the home makes if there's an untimely death.
Yeah, mom's worth millions.
Absolutely.
So Ed, okay, so you're thinking about the disability and the life insurance now. Are there some age caps or cutoffs where it becomes more difficult or more expensive, regardless of your personal circumstance? Are there some ages to be aware of?
Well, I think it's most like other financial decisions, Donna, whether it be saving for retirement, when do you start that, or when do you begin to buy your insurances. The younger you start, the better off you are without almost any exception, because the cost of insuring someone, of course, where the probability is low of them having, for example, in life insurance, the younger you are, of course, the probability of untimely death is much lower than it is as you age.
Right.
So as a result, you can retain coverage for your family or for yourself of pennies on the dollar compared to what it would take if you waited till you were in your 40s or 50s.
Right.
And you get past that point, then, of course, the rate of increase is pretty astronomical. As it applies to disability, it's kind of a little different. If you think about disability, your greatest risk is probably in your 30s. So you might have a situation where age does have an impact on the overall premium, but the younger you are, the greater the risk. So you take that into account with your age, and it's probably good to start with that before you hit the highest risk points as well.
And so how do these issues, well, we're actually going to get to this after the break. I'm going to pose the question now because I want to give everybody an opportunity to think about whether they'd like to call in and join us here today. But I want to get into, when we come back from our break, Ed, a little bit about actually planning for, catastrophes and how they can impact the business.
Okay.
And talk a little bit about that. And we're here talking today with Edwin Gaskin, and he's giving us a ton of useful information to help us make decisions about financial and insurance planning for our businesses and for our families. Do join us, 800-773-0355, to pose your question or your comment to our guest today. This is Indie Business Radio. We'll be right back.
Why is everyone listening to GlobalTalkRadio.com? Because it's the future of talk radio. Every day, more and more people are finding Internet radio as not just an alternative media, but as a replacement to traditional AM and FM broadcast stations. Internet radio offers a wider variety of programs, convenient on-demand listening that meets your schedule, and fewer commercial interruptions. And GlobalTalkRadio.com is already leading the way by matching this content with a highly targeted Internet audience. GlobalTalkRadio.com offers its listeners one of the widest programming varieties on the Internet, from business and finance to self-improvement, paranormal, health, literature, romance, politics, and more. There are also opportunities for prospective hosts who would like to host their own weekly or one-time talk shows. Want to learn more? Check us out at www.globaltalkradio.com and see the future of talk radio today.
Welcome back to Indie Business Radio. We're here this afternoon with financial planner Edwin Gaskin, and he's sharing a boatload of information to help us sort through all of the questions we as indie business owners and family members have with respect to covering our businesses, protecting our families in the event that something happens to us, and just really another thing, too, is keeping the business going if something happens to you. But, Edwin, I want to talk for a second about, today's economy. Today's economy is so different from the way it was even just 10 years ago. And today going out to get a job is so different from the way it was back then. I mean, you've got to drive to a job, so you've got gas prices through the roof. You've got, daycare prices rising constantly. Mm-hmm. And you've got employers out of business necessity in order to keep their businesses going who are cutting back tremendously on the number of benefits that are offered. And I think for many families today, working from home in your own business has more benefits than it used to, in part for some of those reasons. On the other hand, there are a lot of jobs out there that do offer benefits that you can't provide for yourself as a small business owner. So, again, it kind of goes back to the point we were talking about in the first segment. It's so frustrating to sort through it all. It's like, well, maybe I'll just do what feels best and hope it all works out. But that's obviously not a good strategy. So can you talk for a second about, businesses, people deciding whether to be in business or whether to get a job? How do you do that financial calculation?
Well, that's a great question, and oftentimes with my clients, will be faced with that very question. A spouse, one of the spouses may determine after working for years in a particular profession that they want to go out and start their own business, or you may have a situation where young families that have young children at home, the children begin to grow up, and the wife decides, if they have been at home, to potentially go back into the workplace. And you have the question of determining, well, is it going to make a difference if I go back out into the workplace, or if I sacrifice and give up a regular paycheck to open your own business, what's it going to mean? I think the number one thing that I hate to be saying the same thing over and over again, but the number one thing that I can recommend for anyone making a change in their life is to have a plan. Mm-hmm. Because in having a plan, you can determine potentially what the cost would be.
Right.
The number one reason businesses fail, the number one reasons that people have financial hardship out of medical reasons are because they don't have enough capital or really underestimate the amount of time or money it takes to get a business off the ground.
Right.
So if you don't do any planning, if you don't know how much the rent's going to be, if you don't know how much it's going to be to pay for the services that you need or
right.
the supplies, it's pretty difficult to budget that out and predict whether you have enough money to get going or not.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so when it comes to choosing between working outside the home and assessing the benefits that are offered there, because quite frankly, so many people have jobs. People say this to me all the time. Yeah, my job's okay, I get paid okay, but I'm really there for the benefits.
Okay.
Calculating what they're worth includes, does it not, calculating not only what your employer is paying in terms of the premium to cover you, but how much of that is coming out of your paycheck as well.
Well, that's a good point, Donna. In fact, many people overlook, if they're employees, the value of the benefits they receive from their employer, and in fact don't really add those in to what they're getting in salary.
Right.
On the other side, if you're about to hire someone, you often forget about the fact that there are other costs that you may incur from having an employee. Both of those need to be taken into account. I'll tell you one of the biggest differences that we find, of course, nowadays is that the responsibility for incurring those costs are increasingly borne by the individual, whether it be saving for the retirement. I mean, I think everybody pretty much knows that pensions have gone down dramatically since the 1980s, where you could be expected that your company would take care of you.
Yeah.
The other thing is that with medical costs, most people are now sharing a larger proportion of the cost of their medical insurance than they used to. It used to be that you and the employee and the family was covered. Now, oftentimes we'll find that only a percentage of even the employees' premiums for their medical coverage are included with their employment.
Right, and you have to pay the rest.
That's absolutely right.
So, Ed, do you think that the fact that these things are happening have forced people to become more aware and become more educated about the types of things that we're talking about?
Absolutely. I mean, life has many more moving pieces financially today than it did for our parents.
And do you think overall, as much work as it is, that it's a good thing? Because to me it seems like as frustrating as it can be to deal with the things that you were just talking about, opening your eyes and really seeing how much control you can take over your personal situation can be pretty empowering, can't it?
Well, that's the other side of the coin when we were talking about, making decisions of whether to go in business or not. Many times that decision is not a financial decision, I find, working with clients. It's a satisfaction, or someone might have a sense of passion or a sense of mission to accomplish something or to serve someone or to provide something to the marketplace, a great idea. So therefore, the financial decision is not necessarily the biggest component. But even in doing so, you still have to take that into account, no question about it.
And you're talking to an audience of people who are really in business because of the passion, and obviously they want to make money, but if that's all they wanted to do, they'd have found a better job that would pay them more. So, what you're talking about is really important, and you balance that desire to do what you love with the reality that you have to generate a profit.
Yes, that's correct. And of course,
you have to generate enough profit eventually so that you can cover some of these issues that we're talking about here.
Absolutely. I think that comes with the decision of whether you're participating in a hobby or participating in a business. Obviously, if you're participating in a business, you have to have certain infrastructure, certain procedures. I strongly recommend if you're really doing a business as opposed to a hobby, you need to have a good accountant. You need to have somebody that may assist you with the keeping of your records, a good attorney when you're entering into contracts, and, of course, a financial planner to help you look at the overall of how all those financial matters tie together.
Now, Ed, I have a question about life insurance.
Yes.
What's the difference between permanent life insurance and term life insurance?
Good question. Many people would refer to term insurance as the type of insurance that has extremely low premiums, that usually today is mostly bought in 10-year term, 20-year term, 30-year term, 15-year term. It's extremely inexpensive, and it's designed to allow a young family that may have a limited budget to get the kind of coverage they need if they have young children to take their family through the times of biggest risk, which is while their children are young before they reach adulthood. But the older you get, oftentimes you'll find that term insurance goes up dramatically in cost to the point where at some point you are almost better off looking at types of coverage that may be there permanently. If you think about term insurance as something you rent and permanent insurance as something that's there as long as you live, the choice between the two depends on, again, your individual circumstances. But oftentimes it is really great to have a combination of both if you can afford it. But one of the things you want to make sure is that during the most critical times of your family's life, when your children are young, that you have enough. And oftentimes that'll mean that you'll want to choose term insurance because it's so inexpensive.
And so, Ed, when you talk about term, if you say, for example, buy a 10-year term policy, when it expires, what happens? Do you get to renew it at the same rate, or is there some sort of new structure that kicks in at the end of that term?
Well, unfortunately, as you can well imagine, the reason why it's so cheap is that there's another side of the coin.
Okay.
And that is when you get to the end of that term, while in many cases, the two types of term, one type of term allows you to continue at a much, much, much higher cost of premiums, whereas others literally end. The fact of the matter is that it's pay me now or pay me later. If you need coverage, you've misjudged the amount of time you need, you're going to have to pay dearly for the right to continue. But the number one factor in determining how you continue really has to do with probably your health and your age at the time you need to re-up, so to speak. If you're in great health, then it's not going to be a big deal. You're still going to pay more, but you may be able to get coverage. If you're in poor health, you run the risk of not being able to get coverage at the most critical time of your life. And so you often want to consider things that the general public does not consider when they're buying a term product, for example, is the terms and conditions and whether the conversion privileges that allow you to continue without further proof of medical qualifications, et cetera.
Right, because you never know what the future holds. So for permanent insurance, it's not limited by a term.
That's correct. In many cases, permanent insurance is available for life or until you get to a very, very ripe age, like 98 or 100 years of age. The benefit that it has is many times you will have permanent insurance that will allow you to accumulate cash value. And for some people, that is a great benefit if they want to have living benefits from their life insurance policies. For other people, they just want pure coverage, and other forms of policies allow you to have permanent coverage with pure coverage and not much consideration with cash value. It just depends, again, on what your circumstances and needs are. Your estate planning situation might be different than something where you're just creating an estate for your family, immediate family.
So with the permanent, Ed, there's two types. In other words, I always thought that permanent was permanent, and it also carried with it the benefit that you discussed, which was the accumulation of cash value. But you're saying that you can get a permanent policy that doesn't do that, so is it kind of a hybrid?
Well, I'm not sure how much detail we want to get into in terms of the different types, but I will tell you without getting to a whole lot of detail, is yes, there are different types of permanent, quote-unquote, insurance, depending on your circumstances and depending on what's important to you. Obviously, I'm sure most people are familiar with the whole life. People have heard increasingly about variable universal life, and then, which has ability to participate in the market with your premium. And then there's others called universal life, which are fixed, which allow you to not be concerned with the market, but have permanent insurance without having the benefit of building up a lot of cash value. So there are a lot of variables, and which one is best for you really depends on your individual circumstances and, of course, your ability to afford the benefit.
Which really highlights your point of getting some help and finding somebody who's well-versed in these issues to help you. So I have a couple of questions along those lines.
Okay.
And I'm going to ask them together because I know you'll consider both of them. I think they're kind of interestingly related. The first is, how do you keep from getting scammed? Because, you know, if you watch any television at all, and you don't have to watch much, there's all the men and women who were movie stars 25 years ago. They're all selling insurance. Well, they're not selling it, but they're spokespeople for insurance companies. You know, and you've seen the commercials at the funerals and all this stuff, and it's only $10 a month, and it's like, yeah, right. So it's like, the first question is, you know, some tips on how to prevent falling into any of these traps that might be out there. And then also, how do you choose a professional to help you? What qualifications do you want them to have? What do you look for? So can you look at those two things and tell us what your thoughts are on that?
I think the most important thing you could possibly do is to talk to your friends and your family about professionals they may have used, agents or planners or even people that they feel are knowledgeable on the topic that you can speak to about what your particular circumstances are. One of the things that I find is that people are really afraid to ask questions that they may feel are either stupid questions or you know, things that they should know. The reality of it is that if they work with a professional, they're used to hearing all kinds of questions, and we don't assume that the general public necessarily understands the intricacies of even things that may be important to them. So it's number one thing would be to talk to colleagues, talk to friends, family members who have had a great experience, to have them recommend someone to you.
Getting a word-of-mouth recommendation. We're going to take a break and come back and finish with your thoughts on that, Ed. I hate to interrupt you at this particular point, but that's really something that's a good time to take a break to think about is, you know, look through your Rolodex during the break or just think about some friends in your neighborhood or whatever, and maybe you've got some people you can ask who they use, and then you can get a good recommendation that way. We all know that word of mouth is the best form of marketing. We're going to take a break. This is Indie Business Radio. We'll be right back.
Want to stay on top of what's new in the radio industry? Sign up for a free subscription to the Future of Talk Radio, available exclusively to listeners of globaltalkradio.com, and find out what's new in the world of online radio. Listeners can find out about new shows and special guests. People with something special to offer can find out how to become a guest and how to prepare for an interview. And prospective hosts will find a valuable resource for everything from planning their new program to selecting topics and guests, recouping expenses by selling advertising, and more. Sign up today for your free subscription to the Future of Talk Radio by visiting www.globaltalkradio.com and learn about the future of talk radio today.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Indie Business Radio. We're here this afternoon with financial planner Edwin Gaskin. And before we took our break, he was sharing with us some of his tips for finding a person who is qualified to help you sort through all of these insurance and financial planning issues. And his first suggestion was get recommendations from friends, and that's such good advice. Of course, we all know how important that is to our businesses. It's a really good form of inexpensive marketing. You do a good job, and your customers will tell their friends, and you get more business. So that's a really good one. Any other tips, Ed, for choosing somebody?
Well, yes. You want to determine what type of or how much help you'd like. For example, if you start with an agent, you may focus only on your life insurance needs, but in reality, you may also need to evaluate how your financial circumstances tie together. So you might want to look for a financial planner, someone who can look with you and examine your goals in light of your financial circumstances and actually set out a strategy that includes meeting your goals that may have life insurance as part of the solution.
So you can get one person who does both of those things.
Absolutely. In fact, in my case, I'm a financial planner, but I also am able to act as an agent. I'm also able to act as a broker for a group of things. Obviously, anything financial that my clients need, pretty much I can help them tie it together. And you can find people like that. You can find independent financial planners who actually don't get into the implementation side as well. Again, there's no right or wrong model. It's just a matter of what your particular situation is and what you feel your needs are.
And so, Ed, do you recommend that one of the questions you ask when you're thinking about engaging someone's services is how much experience do they have helping people like you, like if you're a young family or maybe if you're like a newly divorced dad or whatever the case may be, should you try and find someone who has experience working with circumstances that are somewhat similar to yours?
I think experience is invaluable. If you're a small business owner, our question is, has that person had any experience working with small business owners? If you are a larger business owner, or if you're a specialist in a particular industry, oftentimes you'll find their financial people that specialize in a particular industry even that may be able to bring insights to help you integrate your business and your personal life better financially.
Mm-hmm. And Ed, do you have any thoughts on how, and this question is kind of coming out of the blue, we never talked about it, but it just occurred to me that I've talked with some financial planners and people before who also claim to be able to help you a little bit, or maybe a lot, in terms of real estate investment. Is that part of the service that some people in this industry offer?
Well, a financial planner, let me describe pretty much what a financial planner does, and maybe that'll help answer the question.
Okay.
If you think about building something, my son is really great with, I don't know if I can use the brand name, so I'll avoid it, but blocks that you build things with come in different colors.
Gee, I wonder what brand it is.
And if he's just playing in his room with, putting the wall together, he doesn't need to plan ahead in terms of what pieces or colors he's going to use, etc. But if he's building something semi-mechanical that has moving parts that rolls or transforms or whatever, he's got to think ahead in terms of what pieces he's going to need and what specific colors he's going to need. I think the same thing goes with an individual. If your financial life is extremely simple, you can probably do most of everything on your own by reading good books and looking at websites, etc. But if you have a complicated situation where there are many moving parts or many different decisions or a very limited stream of income that you have to make tough decisions with, like retirement versus college and things like that, you'll find that it's much more efficient to use a financial planner that can actually help you look at the big picture and then help you determine a strategy that fits that particular picture. For example, if you have $100, do you put 10 in retirement or do you put 20 in college or do you do it the other way around? It's not necessarily a simple question for the average person to discern. If you have a business, it makes your life even more complex in terms of how to take advantage of as well as avoid the pitfalls that business owners face.
Yeah. Wow. Now, you mentioned something that we hadn't talked about before, and that is exactly what I just forgot. So you did mention it, and we don't have rewind here like on football. So I'm going to skip that and go to my next thought, which you have. What do you think about some of these commercials that we see on TV? It's so easy. Pick up the phone, dial the 800 number, and bam, you're covered. But, of course, we all know, sometimes if it sounds too good to be true, it might be. What are some of the things we should look for when we see those?
Well, you know what? I would also put into that brief articles in the newspaper sometimes, or even financial celebrities on television. I'll tell you, if it takes me an hour sitting down with someone to find out what's appropriate for them, you can pretty much gather how appropriate a solution that you hear for 15 seconds with a lot of small print is for you, your particular situation. Right. That's all I'll say.
Okay. Well, that's really good. So, all these places usually, I guess, have websites where you can go at least educate yourself. But I think it sounds like, you're much better off getting that word-of-mouth recommendation from someone. And I just did remember my other topic, and that was college savings, Ed.
Yes.
529 plans, other kinds of plans. And I know this is, not wanting intricate detail, but what general types of plans are available for parents who are trying to save for college and trying to do it on a budget? Because when you have a small business, there's usually a pretty small profit margin.
Well, I think a rule of thumb as it goes for saving for any large goal, whether it be buying a new house, whether it be saving for college or saving for retirement, is the sooner you start, the better off you are, because it takes less dollars if you start way ahead of a goal than it takes if you wait till the end. And obviously, that definitely goes for college planning. I can't tell you how many times parents are surprised when their kids turn 14.
Yeah.
And college is a few years away.
Years away, that's right.
The fact of the matter is it's not a surprise that they're going to get there. If your child has a bent to go on to further education, we know it's going to happen.
Yeah.
I'd rather see a couple put aside a few dollars a month at the age of 1, 2, 3 than to have that panic look on their face when they know college is a couple of years away. But nevertheless, even if they do wait, starting today is always better than putting off the goal even further.
And, I read a newspaper article, and I can't remember where or when it was in the last year, with someone, a financial columnist, I think it was, said that when they asked the general public, what's your college savings plan for your kids, the answer was scholarship.
Well, I think there are a lot of people praying and hoping, and that's not a bad strategy either if you don't have any others, but it's also better to do other things.
Well, it kind of goes back to what we were saying at the top of the show, which is, it's so much to wrap your hands around, let's just hope.
Yes.
We can work it out when the time comes, which essentially in terms of college means that your kid, has some remarkable talent or straight A's, which of course you don't know is going to happen when they're 3.
And I will tell you, as it relates to your earlier question, though, Donna, is that there are, of course, options available to parents that allow them to have certain tax benefits, that may allow them to have benefits for their children, that allow them to be able to still qualify for needs-based financial aid, et cetera. And that's one of the best things about the program you mentioned, the 529. There's a lot of information out there on the 529s. In fact, there's some on my website. You'll find some on MetLife's website that can really give you some good context in terms of the choices that you have. I will tell you, though, that it almost always makes sense to take some advantage of these tax-advantaged vehicles, because that's why the Congress, in their great wisdom, put them into place to make it easier for us to send our children to college.
Or should make it easier for them to send their kids to college, and then we just get
if it's a side benefit, we'll appreciate that, too.
Let's let all those other people have the benefit, too.
Right.
So there are so many things to think about, and when you're thinking about running your business in a way that allows you to actually have your own 401k or your own retirement plan, are there some options, just generally speaking, in that area as well?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked the question. I would strongly encourage, especially small business owners, to not neglect the ability to set up retirement plans for their business, no matter how small they are. You can save a percentage of your income in a tax-advantaged way, which is what retirement plans are, then it would definitely put you in better shape. And it's not always the 401k that's the most appropriate vehicle for a small business. It may be, or it may not be. There are many different options out there that oftentimes provide greater simplicity, as well as more flexibility for a small business owner. But it really depends on the structure of the business, depends on the number of employees, which one is most appropriate. I wish there could be a one-size-fits-all, but the reason why there are so many is because different plans are better for different circumstances.
Well, and I think that brings up the point again that, you know, if I'm a small business owner and I want to start a 401k so I can save for my retirement, then I want a financial planner who's done that before.
Absolutely.
Not just a really good financial planner who's only worked with people with a traditional job.
That's correct.
So that's a really good, I think, just something to keep in mind that, you know, when you guys are listening to the show and Ed's talking about so many different things that we all know are so important, that finding someone to help you wade through it is going to take so much of the pressure off of you because you'll have someplace to go to get your answers. So, Ed, along those lines, you are available to help families and business owners. Tell us a little bit about where we can go to find out about you. I know you're in Maryland, so tell us a little bit about where you offer your services and how we can get in touch with you for more information.
Thank you, Donna. Well, obviously our focus is the metropolitan Washington area, which includes Maryland, Virginia, the District of Columbia, and nearby states. We are licensed to do business in other states as well, but our focus is the Washington metropolitan area. You can go to my website at yourfinancialarchitect.com and find a list of the states that I'm actually able to help people in. But oftentimes I can refer to colleagues in other states if I'm not able to assist someone in a particular state, and I'm more than happy to do so. Another great resource, of course, would be MetLife.com for small business owners, SBA.gov. Great places to go to find general guidance and general information for small business owners.
And, you know, Ed, let's mention people and remind them there is so much free information, and I know you can't believe everything you read on the Internet, but when you're
absolutely not.
SBA.gov or MetLife, there's a lot of basic information that's empowering that's out there that's available for free, right?
Absolutely. In fact, when I designed our website, one of the things we wanted to make sure is there was enough information to give people a basic understanding on many, many different financial topics. And then, of course, if they have specific interests, they can use that as a starting point to be able to ask the type of questions that may make the time with a financial professional most useful to them.
And Ed, tell us a little bit about, I mean, you have a lot of certifications and a lot of areas of expertise. Can you tell us what they are for you personally? What are they? I know financial planner.
Well, I think the biggest benefit that I bring to my clients is experience in the areas that I specialize in. I again specialize with working with small business owners. And, you know, small doesn't necessarily mean tiny. Some of my business clients are actually quite large in terms of their companies, but they do have very few owners, so may have one or two owners despite the size of the revenue of the company. I also work with clergy and assist clergy in integrating their financial lives and working with boards of non-for-profits. I also work with physicians, another type of small business owner. My background is in business. I have an MBA at the University of North Carolina, and I've been a small business owner in the past. So I think those types of backgrounds when you're looking for someone are really important to make sure that that person understands where you're coming from and maybe has experienced a little bit about what you've experienced so they can not only provide expertise but a little empathy at the same time.
Well, I mean, and that is so important, and that's why I mentioned at the top of the show that you're a husband and a dad. So you have, you know, you have, it's not just you, you know, and you're working to obviously protect yourself, but also your family. And there's a lot of things to think about when you're juggling all that.
Absolutely. My wife has been a small independent business owner as well, so I definitely understand all that. And making sure that the values of your family carry over to your business and making sure that you're able to financially sustain what you love to do, all of those things are important, which means that it's all the more important to, again, set goals and priorities for your life.
Well, Ed, I certainly appreciate having you on the show today. You have shared such valuable information. I want to remind everyone to visit yourfinancialarchitect.com to find out more about Ed and his services, and also to take a look at his goals and qualifications and things of that nature, and also to read through some of the answers to some frequently asked questions. I'm looking at them now. How do I get a better return on my investments? I want to retire by age 60. What do I do? There's some really great information here. And for those of you who want to give Ed a call, you can give him a call at 301-474-0.
Donna, I'm sorry. Let me give you a different number, please.
Oh, I'm just reading from the website. Scratch that, guys. What's your phone number, Ed?
Thank you. That is one of the phone numbers, but the main number is 443-957-6187. And also, people can email me from the website if they go there. And if they'd like a newsletter, we have a free newsletter for business owners. If they'd like to subscribe to that, just drop me a note through the website. I'll be more than happy to sign them up.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing all that information, Ed. It's been really wonderful having you here on the show. For those of you who are ready to get on the Internet and join the discussion, you can do that at indiebusinessblog.com. And we've got some great guests coming up. On November the 26th, we've got licensed insurance broker Daryl Stafford to talk about insurance issues for small business owners, particularly products liability insurance. You want to sell your products, you need to have some kind of liability insurance in place. And we've got some great guests coming up in December as well, so I hope you'll visit indiebusinessblog.com and also download or stream any of my radio shows at indiebusinessradio.com. This is Donna Maria signing off for the week. Enjoy your life, build your business, and have your way.
You're listening to GlobalTalkRadio.com.